feedback in the v4 beta channel, and we're trying to move very quickly on addressing that feedback. So is the Effect.all API already stable, or are you planning to change some APIs? I'm asking because I have a framework in Effect and I'm planning to migrate to v4. v4 is in beta right now, and wow, I can hear myself on YouTube.
Oh yeah, I think YouTube catched up and started.
Sorry. I don't like it. I was hearing an echo of myself in my headphones. Yeah, v4 is in beta, and if you read the release post, which I can link in the Twitch chat, or maybe Mattia can link it for me.
Yeah, sure.
It basically indicates that between every beta version, you should be prepared for breaking changes. There may not necessarily be breaking changes, but you should definitely be prepared. So between beta versions, we're reserving the right to break things. So I guess the short answer to your question is the API already stable? No, but we're hoping to stabilize it relatively quickly. That being said, we're definitely going to take our time, because v4 is we're gonna make it a like a LTS schedule type of thing. We're gonna come up with like a longer term stability release schedule for Effect. Here's me who hasn't played with Effect yet. Very tempted to. You definitely should.
Yep.
I'm not biased at all.
No way.
Does v4 reduce the skill issue problem? We're trying to do that. There's been a lot of work we've put in to try to address rough edges, I guess. We've tried to cut down substantially on the number of different ways to do the same thing. So trying to put people on the golden path from the beginning with Effect. And the documentation that we're going to be working on when we get to it is really going to try to focus more on practical usage versus more technical docs. Mattia, I don't know. Is there anything else? I know we've done a lot of work in 4.0 to reduce the skill ceiling and make
also,
it much easier.
Naming, I think that also I think that the overall naming for v4 is way better, way understandable compared to some combinators that had been v3. Like you mentioned, things like catch-all want, or things like that. And yeah, there has been a lot of improvements in areas as you mentioned, trying to unify the API, give more meaningful names, context now being service map, things like that. But yeah.
Let me also pop out both chats. Oops.
Yep.
So that I can actually see what's going on. But yeah, like Mattia said, those are two of the smaller things we're trying to do. But I think it's all having that many fewer ways to execute the same type of logic is already helpful, because even for us as maintainers, we don't have to explain so many different things. But yeah, like I said, this is a great time to try Effect, because we're really trying to iterate on feedback very fast. We have that luxury in the beta that we can just kind of take feedback and incorporate it right away if we think it makes sense.
And also, as we mentioned last time, it's the best time if you think that some API got missed for some reason through the migration from v3 to v4, or something you liked in v3 that's now it's not perfect in your opinion in v4. It's now the exact moment to give your feedback, because it's now the moment I think we are more receptive towards user feedback, because now we have a foundation built up, and now we are fine-tuning towards whatever you are trying out and giving us your feedback. So as Maxwell pointed out, I encourage you to try it out, but also I encourage you to tell us how it went. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Whatever. We are open to any feedback you have.
For sure. Absolutely. To effect or not to
or
effect?
not to effect? That's easy.
No. That's an easy question. Easy answer. Easy answer. I think that also the fact that Effect is so much smaller as a library, like the footprint is smaller, which we talked about the last time, makes the like conversation about can we adopt Effect, can we not adopt Effect, like a lot easier because the footprint of the library is so much smaller. We've already had like some folks chatting with us in Discord about migrating to V4 and seeing like pretty substantial reductions in bundle size, which was one of the goals we had with Effect V4 from the beginning. So yep, Sylvan talking about biggest pros bundle size, front end and edge computing will love this. Yes, that is that. The goal is to try to see more of Effect on the front end. I think like it's an area of interest of ours to try to make more strides into the front end space. Just because, especially with like Effect Atom, I feel like there's a big opportunity for a framework like Effect on the front end. So,
I would also say that there is also like a little smaller like runtime overhead in V4 compared to what we had in V3. I already tried ported some apps I had, some like even the language service internally now uses V4 and does not use V3 anymore. And I noticed like slightly improvements due to fewer like memory imprints that V4 has compared to V3.
Yep, definitely. So does anybody have any questions about V4 or the things that they tried to port that they ran into trouble with, or things that they want us to talk about, or anything like that? Because I mean, Mattia and I could ramble on for the next hour, but that's not as fun as you folks telling us what you want to hear.
So yeah, questions, feedback on how the web migration went, whatever, we are open.
If not, we can just like, talk about other things in 4.0 that we haven't chatted about yet. Like one thing we could talk about is we could talk about the new and improved CLI.
Oh yeah.
I want to hear more about the schema changes in V4. It's the most substantial module change in the ecosystem, right? I mean, I'm not sure if it's the most substantial, but it certainly is an enormous refactor from V3, especially like under the hood. If you're using schema like basic schema, you're like, if you're not doing any complex transformations and you're just kind of like using the basic features of schema, it should feel relatively familiar. Like the names of things and whatnot haven't changed drastically. I think some of like the coolest stuff with schema that Julia was able to incorporate surrounds like this map fields combinator. I mean, it's not the coolest, but I think like something
it's
that
one of them.
Yeah, like probably like many of the questions we've gotten in the past about how do I do X with schema have now been addressed by this ability to map fields and get a new schema out of that. For example, like there was a question in Discord the other day about, or maybe it wasn't in Discord, maybe Mattia gave the example, I don't remember, but like about taking a structure schema and like making all of the keys optional or something like that, right, Mattia? Like,
yeah, it was both something we mentioned that we had also like a question in the Discord channel. And yeah, but I would say also like one phrase that Julio said to me, and I think that summarizes all of the changes in schema, is more like the internals of schema have now been arranged in a more like sensible and more reasonable way. From a consumer part of side, you'll see some API changes, but like the most like powerful of the new V4 schema compared to the V3 one comes from the internal rearrangements, I would say.
Yeah, I like also the re-encoding of variants and whatnot. This is like a little more technical, but I also don't have like the best understanding of like this refactor because I didn't take the time to like look into it yet. But the base schema type, like I think it's called bottom, I think, in V4, has like 14 type parameters or something like that.
Yeah.
But for people defining methods that like take in a schema and like, I don't know, use that schema to do something or whatever, like putting generic constraints on a schema is much easier now when you're defining methods, just by like making the generic constraint like extends schema.top, because schema.top is like the top schema. It's like the
father of them all.
The father of them all, yes. But then you can like go a step down from that, and you can use schema.codec, which allows you to define like constraints on the input and output types of that schema. So if you like want to create a generic constraint in a method that you're defining that also constrains the input and output types of the schema, you can do that with schema.codec, which is nice. So like defining APIs that consume schemas in a generic way is much easier now, in my opinion. I hope Dylan picks up the Effect Cloudflare library again. Indeed. I don't know if Dylan's still here or if he left already, but Dylan, we want Effect Cloudflare. Cracks asks about STM changes. Oh, man, I wish we had Mike on, because I know I was joking around the last time that the only thing that Mike delivered in 4.0 was like helping me with logging layers, but Mike actually refactored
yeah,
the way that STM works in 4.0. So now STM's built directly into like the runtime. Instead of being like a separate type, you can actually use STM directly as part of the runtime. Maybe we can show some of this. Hang on, let me share my screen.
Yep.
But I wish Mike was here so we could tell him to talk about it instead. Mike, are you watching? Do you want to join? Let me. What is STM even? Good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mike, there's actually a stream in the Effect YouTube somewhere where Mike taught me about STM. That's actually a really good stream. Mike's a good teacher. Screen.
Software transactional memory.
Okay, let me zoom in a bit. Oh, Mike is watching. Mike, you want to join and talk about STM? He's like, no. Let me see here. Packages. Effect. Test. Unstable. Is it unstable? No, I think it's in here.
Yeah.
I don't remember where this is. So the transactional data structures are also named differently in V4, and they're all like prefixed with TX. I think we can do a deep dive next week. That's a good idea. I'll talk briefly about it, and then next week Mike can do like a deep dive on all of this, and you can ask him more questions about STM. But the nice part about STM now, maybe we can look at transactional semaphore as like an example. Here we go. Previously in Effect 4.0, STM was its own module. Like you had a STM stands for software transactional memory, and Mike does a much better job of explaining this than I will. So next week he can give you kind of like an overview. For those of you that are curious, maybe Mattia, you can find the link to the video where Mike actually walked me through STM. But what's nice in V4 is you can operate on transactional data structures directly from Effect, which is pretty cool. So like you don't really need to worry about like having a separate module that you need to import and deal with when using these STM data structures. And let me see if I can find a good example of this. Transactional. I feel like these aren't the best examples. Maybe there's like a JS doc we can look at. In the effect module. Transactional. So yeah, I guess this is like a nice little example, self-contained, but in Effect 4.0, because STM is built in to Effect, you can do these like take the concept of a database transaction and kind of put it on the side for a moment. We're going to talk about transactions in like the context of STM. So in the context of software transactional memory, you have transactions that are all or nothing. You define a sequence of behaviors and they get kind of like tracked in a journal. And if there's a problem with the execution of that transaction, everything gets rolled back. So in 4.0, instead of having a separate module, you can define a transaction directly within Effect, and then you can define like atomic blocks where any operations within the block either succeed or fail together. So if you like are operating on like a transactional data structure and something fails here, all of the changes that you made in this transaction get rolled back to before you executed the transaction. But again, I think it'll be more fun next week during office hours to have Mike talk about this, because he did a ton of work to bring this into the core. And it's like, it's funny because STM is a little known and little used module in Effect. It's like, it's got a very like specific set of circumstances when it's useful. Because generally speaking, like this module, it's not something that would be in your like daily toolkit. But we can talk next week about like what situations this really becomes like important. What strategies do you use to reduce LLMs using V3 APIs? I've tried various strategies and would be curious if you have ones that work consistently. We're trying, actually, I should say Tim is working on trying to figure out a way to make LLMs perform well with Effect 4.0 without them having been trained on it yet, right? Because I think we saw within the last year, LLMs training catching up with V3, so they tend to work relatively well with V3 code, but they still are struggling a little bit with some of the changes we made in 4.0. So Tim's been working on this, like, where is it? Packages, tools. This AI doc gen. No, wait, is this it? I think it is, yes.
Yeah.
This AI doc gen tool, which is meant to kind of like allow us to define AI docs, like documentation that's specifically meant to be read by LLMs to help them perform well with 4.0. So we're doing experimentation here to try to see if we can help folks get the most out of their LLMs when using Effect v4. I haven't directly spoken to Tim about like the goal of this yet, like what the goal of like consumption is from the end user, but I know that this is meant to be given to folks so that you can try to get more out of your LLMs.
There is also, like, I just hacked it around the last few days, last couple of days. There is also like a new feature in the LSP that is coming that basically will allow you, if you use the LSP patch mode and you are using Effect v4, but the usage of Effect v3 API is detected, it will automatically like emit a warning trying to like catch in a net your LLM and say, hey, you are hallucinating, you are running and writing Effect on pre-trained data from Effect v3. and now know that you should use instead the effect v4. So go look at this repository and figure out which is the v4 API. So it's something I am trying out. It sometimes performs well, sometimes doesn't. But again, it's a different like purpose. From what team is working on is like to trying to pre-feed the LLM with correct data, and what I am providing with the LSP is more like a catchback full net. If the LLM doesn't like pre-trained and pre-fetched on the correct usage on the correct API and falls back on trying something old, it will try to provide the LLM better info and say, hey, don't even try that, because that's not what you should do with Effect v4.
Yeah, and in lieu of all of that, like I've been working with Effect 4.0 in a couple of applications that I've been tooling around with recently, and I've gotten quite a bit of mileage out of just like putting in my agents.md, like, hey, you have access to the v4 effect. You're using Effect v4 and you have access to the code base under like repos Effect v4. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And like I've gotten quite a bit of mileage out of that. I know it's like the simple strategy we've been using for a really long time, but I've still gotten pretty good mileage out of that. But that being said, we're trying to improve the LLM story with this like AI docs tool. So maybe, you know, Tim and I are scheduled to stream this evening. So maybe we'll take some time and talk about like the goals of this, and like maybe we'll start testing it out on an app or something like that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I have a loud keyboard. Sorry, I need to pick up my phone because it's picking up my keyboard noises.
I know Schema v4 supports effectful transforms. That actually was supported in v3 too, I believe. Can you give an example of the usefulness of effectful schemas? Because I end up only using schema for object validation, but I can't think of use cases. I mean, I think there's plenty of use cases where you may want to have an effectful transformation in your like schema. So you can imagine that like you're doing a transformation with your schema and you want to embed in that transformation logic that like fetches some information from an API and then uses that information to further inform the transformation that you're doing. Like maybe, I don't know, a well-known endpoint on some API, or maybe like something, I don't know.
Denormalizing API, yeah.
Yeah, so there are, I can't like think of like a concrete use case right now. Maybe Mattia can.
One use case I had, but maybe it was more like an abuse of schema. It was like a JWT token that's encrypted. You can define a schema that basically takes in the string and then decodes all of the way into the structure, and then also like provide the encoding back. That is effectful because you have to basically encode and decode. You need like a service in the context to know the key for the encryption and whatever. So that's kind of one. It's not like the asynchronous like transformation you would expect from an effect, but still, like it's an example of trying to transform something effectively from a string into.
No, that's a good point too. Like I think it like tracking the services that are used in an effectful transformation is pretty nice. So like your decode and encode, like your transformations can access the effect context. So if you have like, I don't know, some service that you want to like have a test implementation of in testing, like because schema has the ability to do effectful transforms and effectful filters and whatnot, you can ingest and like you can leverage the dependency injection that Effect provides within your schema transforms as well. So I think it like, go ahead, Matthias, sorry.
And I was saying exactly one example of that is, for example, if you have like structure that have like fields that you have like an user ID and you want like a specific brand that is an existing user ID, you can maybe encode as a schema the transformation from a user ID to an existing user ID, and that would require to provide also a service that is used in order like to ensure that that provided user ID is actually existing for the filtering, as you mentioned. And that's like awesome because now you can like now in v4 you have like different like context tracking for the encoding and the decoding, whereas in v3 was the same encoding, the same the same context tracking for both encoding and decoding. So one change in here, for example, would be that when you decode, you expect to have the service to ensure that that user ID exists. But on the other way around, if you have an existing user ID, that is also like a valid user ID as well. So you will have like a schema that has the user service for the decoding services, but won't have anything for the encoding one, because again, an existing user ID is a valid user ID as well.
And yeah, Carnalut, it was revamped in V4 and enhanced. So like Mattia said, you can track, for example, like in V4, you can actually track dependencies used by the encoding and decoding sides of the schema separately. So like if we go to packages, effect, where's schema, and then we go to like decoding services. So I think it's only in 2 places, but you can see all the generic type parameters here at the bottom type of schema.
just a couple of generics.
Just a couple. But we track these separate, like they're tracked separately now, which is nice. So like you can express services that are only relevant for decoding, which is kind of cool. But yeah, there are definitely use cases for effectful transforms in transformations and in filters and whatnot. But it kind of is, it's very specific to like your domain and what you want to embed in the schema versus what you want to do outside of in your business logic. So
the fact that you now have like separate like services for the encoding and decoding part also like allows you to leverage more schema in order to like to build your data-driven domain, you know, things like as we mentioned before, try to leverage schema also like to define things in your domain, because now we can inject service that can be used in construction, transforming, and whatever.
What else?
Let me see.
Yeah, another good example that Darker's Better provided was like if your schema has to be more strict on decoding or encoding based on an environment, the environment you're running in, you need to dynamically look up like maybe a service or something like that, whatever. So we kind of talked about this, but can you talk about what you plan to achieve from V4 schema.define generation runtime and friends? I'm not exactly sure I understand the question 100%, but we can maybe talk about the schema, what is it called? Schema representation, which I think is a really cool enhancement in 4.0. And this is already used quite a bit under the hood in different places within like Effect. And basically the schema representation module is able to take a schema and convert it into a portable data structure and back. So you can use this schema representation thing to, for example, like send an actual effect schema over the network. So if you want to like take a schema on your server and like send it to your client and then let the client use it, you can convert the schema into a schema representation, send it over the wire, and then convert it back. Which I think is pretty cool. You can use it to store schemas on disk, which you can imagine for use cases like different storage formats like Avro and other things that store schemas alongside the data that they represent. We're using this module, I think, in the Effect.AI SDKs now to do like some fancy stuff with like JSON schema conversion. Code generation is possible because of this. Like it's a pretty cool feature that V3 just like doesn't have at all.
It's one of those things we mentioned before, that from the V4 version rewrite, like it comes out that this schema representation becomes kind of like the core of giving a lot of possibilities, all baked by the same like abstraction behind the scene. which is really, really cool.
Are we talking about the graph module?
Oh, are we talking
Sebastian?
about the graph module? Yes, indeed.
Yes, one of the best modules in Effect, Sebastian. Trying to see if I missed any questions. If I missed any questions, please spam it again into chat. Hello, Alex. I'm sorry I missed your saying hello to you. Is STM used in cluster and workflow? It sounds like that. No, I don't believe that we currently leverage STM in cluster or workflow. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we don't.
If they travel over the wire, do they reference service dependencies by identifier? There are some restrictions of what travel over the wire, because obviously you cannot like encode everything. You cannot like encode a function over the wire. But yeah, you can like, given some like, let's say some restriction, you can like transform your schema over and send it over the wire.
Yeah, and that's actually documented here in this like limitations section of the schema representation like section here. But basically, anything that can't be serialized is not supported.
Yeah.
So transformations, built-in checks actually can be represented, but custom predicates can't be. Yeah, I want to answer this question that's in Discord really quick. So let me maybe take it and see if I can like, what's a good way to make tagged errors part of the response at the edge when the runtime API sends a response? For example, we've got this runtime layer here. Maybe I'll take this and put it on screen. Hang on. Mitya, maybe you can read the question while I while I get the code up.
So what's a good way to make tagged errors part of the response at the edge when the runtime/API sends a response? Example, and here we'll see the code, but we will have basically a runtime layer that has few dependencies, then an handler function that takes in an event and returns back a structure. There you go. Okay, the returns back a structure. Error channel is not clean with parse error, which must be removed to have Lambda handler return expected responses and not crash. Question: what's the best way to make tagged error part of the response? What's good practices to map or transform it?
The error channel is not clean with parse error, which must be removed to have Lambda handler return responses and not crash. So I think like maybe one of the first things we can tackle here is the question about the parse error. So let me just bring over the second piece of this program, the scoped program. I think probably like the first thing you'd want to do here is, if this is the program you're running at the edge of your you're going to, if you want those errors to be sent back by the framework that you're working with, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. You can like return an exit back, like you can serialize and return an exit back with schema. You could model errors as part of the domain, which I think is what we do with HTTP API. Like you have the ability to define errors as part of the domain, but like concretely, if I was just wanted to do this quick and dirty, I would probably take this program and map, depending on what I wanted to do. Like if I wanted to turn parse error into a response that was like I don't know, 500 or something like that, I would take this, I would map parse error to a success like in my program, and then I would like return a 500 based on that. The other thing you could do here is you could do run promise exit and get like the exit result of this program, which would look something like exit that whole big object up here, whatever this is. And then your parse error. And then instead of, if you want to make this like an error that actually goes to your client, you could like do a dot pipe, oops, Effect.map error. This is the parse error. Now you can map the error to like, you know, I don't know, new my domain error that goes to client. And you can have that here now. And with effect, with schema, you have the ability to define schemas for exit values. So if we take all of this out, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I guess this is just like the simplest way I can think of right now. Class my error extends tagged error class. That's interesting. Wait a minute. Import? No, sorry. Class my error extends schema.tag. So and it's interesting, Mattia, that do you have it like this, where like the tooltip shows tagged error, but like
yeah, that's right. That's a bug. That's a bug. Yeah, yeah. That's actually the correct name. Yeah.
So let's just give it a property, and then you can say my success, or maybe we'll say error response. Extends schema.class. These are just like stub schemas to like kind of show this off, but like let's say we want you know, our exit schema, like handler exit. So you can define a schema for an exit where you can give it a value schema, success response, an error schema, error response, and a defect schema, which I guess in this case would be schema.never, or maybe schema.unknown, or maybe schema.defect.
Defect, yeah.
Or even with, you can actually send the stack as well. And now you can use this exit schema to encode. So const encode exit, schema.encode. We'll just use encode sync. Maybe encode an unknown sync too. So now this encode exit thing will take in some unknown input, and it will attempt to encode the exit into something that can be sent over the wire. And then you, on the client end, you would just decode the exit, right? So the point to here is that you have to convert your success and failures to something that can be sent over the wire and interpreted by the client. So if you have, if like your error domain is something that you want to be represented as like a successful response, this is probably how I would start. But if you want your error domain to be something that's represented by a failed response, like a non-200 status code response, then you can go the other direction that I was mentioning, where on the server side, you can like use the exit to determine how you're going to return to the client. Or you can just build up the response within the effect itself and then do a run promise on that, right? Because the alternative is you have a program that response. Can I just do this? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
How do I, what are even the fields in here?
I think
no.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could theoretically build up an effect that returns a response. Like you could say, oh, you know, if something failed, then return new response. Just, you know, ignore that I have null here. You could do status like 500, right? And now you've got an effect that actually like returns a response, and then you can like just in your handler, effect.run promise the program, and now your server handler or whatever will actually have a response, and like it'll be returning a response instead. So there's like a bunch of different ways you can go about this. It really depends on like what the requirements of the platform that you're running on are, and like
also the experience one wants to give to the user.
Right.
So
Frank asks in Twitch, will the AI module support Claude and Codex agent SDKs? Probably not for some time, because those are like highly specific use cases.
I also say, did I see in the comments that you can use graph.toMermaid to produce mermaid charts? Yes, that's a feature also of V3. In the effect graph module, you can build graphs and then like convert them into mermaid graphs. And like that's what it's actually used by the LSP plugin to convert like a graph that's built behind the scene, and then like it's constructed as a mermaid string, and then it's sent to an external service. But yeah, you can like graph.mutable, for example. Yeah.
How do I make an empty graph? Sebastian, where's my empty constructor? Wait, there's a graph module? Yes, there is a graph module.
Yeah, there is a graph module. Yeah.
Some would say it's even better than cron.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is nice because differently from other graph modules, it supports both typed edges and nodes. Not just the node structure is typed, but also like the edges structure is typed, which is like really nice. You can use I think graph.directed. I think, yeah, exactly.
Here, we'll do this, and then we'll do const sol.log. Is this synchronous?
Yeah, it is synchronous, yeah. That should build you. There you go.
There you go. There's your mermaid diagram.
Other questions we have?
There were a bunch that came in.
Yeah, I'd love to know what, if anything, in the new Atom package could mean for me as an Angular developer. Ooh.
Yeah. I'm very sorry that you're an Angular developer. I'm just kidding.
Ooh.
I'm just kidding. I think that Angular is not quite a target for Atom quite like at the moment. I think we're trying to focus on React, Vue, and I think Solid. Tim added. Was it Solid?
Yeah, Solid. Yeah.
That being said, like, I would encourage you to give Atom a try in Angular and see like where the gaps are, like how we could potentially create an integration for Angular. But I don't think it's quite a focus at the moment. I want to know more about the powers of Schema.TaggedUnion. I have been abusing this. The powers? What powers? Tagged union?
Yeah.
Maybe it's in. Wait a minute. Tagged union.
Union, yeah.
Let me. You can define a tagged union using the tagged union helper. This is useful when combining multiple tagged structs into a union. I guess it's shorthand for this.
Yeah. It is syntax sugar for basically that.
Augmenting tagged unions. The as_tagged_union function enhances a tagged union schema by adding helper methods for working with its members. How did I not know this was a thing? What? This helper has some advantages over a dedicated constructor. It does not require changes to the original schema. Just call a helper. You can apply it to schemas from external sources. you can, this is really cool. That I've wanted to do this forever. Because otherwise in V3, like when you want to define, like let's say you are working with an API, like let's say you have a Rust API that you're getting data from that has a code property on it for errors, and you want to convert the code into like a tag that you can then like use in your effect what am I trying to say, in your effect program. This is like a really, in V3 you would have to go through each member of that union and do like a schema.attach property signature, which then when decoding would attach a property signature to that schema for the tag. But in this case, I think you can just use this to enrich the union from an external source, like with that information. You can choose among multiple possible tag fields. It supports unions that include nested unions.
Nested unions. Yeah.
This is very nice.
Yeah. It is basically syntax sugar that provides you already built-in helpers for operations you can do both on the whole union or on members of union, which is really nice. Yeah.
Every time I open this document, I find something new.
Find something new, yeah.
in V4 that I didn't know existed.
Yeah,
this is
it's
really
like
nice.
It's like an holy grail. You find always something new, something amazing you didn't know. So
go ahead, Mattia.
I would love to be able to define a handler for an HTTP API endpoint, not being able to force to use a group, then in HTTP API group. Is there any chance you would implement that?
I think I thought we could already do that. Hang on a minute. Let me see. Unstable HTTP. Because in V3,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can define a handler for individual members of a like individual endpoints, I think.
I thought so as well. So either is a group hallucination, but I thought so as well.
It's nothing like a good old group hallucination. Let me see. HTTP API builder test. So this thing, is this what I want? No. HTTP. Maybe it's in platform node shared. I'm trying to find the answer for you, Gerson. I was pretty sure that there's a method. You know what? Let's just look. Unstable HTTP API. HTTP, what was it? API endpoint. There are examples of just like making one of these. Make. Okay. I was like fairly certain there was a method on here that allowed you to, or maybe it's on the API group.
I thought that there was a method on the API group that constructed from just, but yeah, probably I was hallucinating as well.
I know that in V3, you can take a group, an HTTP API group, I'm pretty sure, and implement a single handler. I'll have to find it. I don't remember where it is. Is there a particular reason why you need to, like you would, like the point of the HTTP APIs is to have the spec separated from the handlers. So like, is there a particular use case or reason that maybe you could discuss with us in Discord about like basically explaining like your use case to us? I'm going to move on. We can
Yeah.
probably continue that discussion in Discord. But
Um,
what is the difference of Schema.TaggedErrorClass with Data.TaggedError? The difference is that one is a schema and one is not. Okay, the slightly less, like, you know,
the quick but right response is that.
yeah, I mean, that really is
Yeah.
the main piece. And like, because like I would push folks primarily into Schema.TaggedErrorClass, because then your errors become serializable. So like when you define an error with Schema.TaggedErrorClass, you can actually send errors over the wire. But if you don't need that, then you can use Data.TaggedError. If you want like a less, I don't know.
Also, if you have things that you don't want to send over the wire for some reason, you have like unserializable values inside of the error itself. Like, for example, a response or whatever inside of the error structure itself. That's one use case where you would use the data one instead of the schema.
Why am I getting flamed in the YouTube chat? It's Adam, guys. What am I saying wrong? Atom.
Effect Adam.
Jeez.
Okay. There is even a cron model. Yes, indeed.
Max is learning as much as we are here. Yes.
Yeah.
I just host office hours so that I can learn about Effect. You can all teach me.
Isn't that the
I've been
purpose?
using Data.TaggedEnum. Am I missing something? No, you can Data.TaggedEnum is fine. It's just, again, those errors are not serializable. So like you would then need to take, if you needed to send those errors over the wire and you wanted to make sure that they were being serialized correctly, I would recommend using schema instead of like Data.TaggedError. So you said for the most part you would recommend Schema.TaggedErrorClass over Data.TaggedError in most cases. Yeah, I would lean into Schema.TaggedErrorClass. Like, define your errors with schema over data in the vast majority of circumstances, because in most cases we're gonna probably want to send our errors somewhere. If not, then Data.TaggedError is fine. Like if you don't need to serialize your errors, then Data.TaggedError is fine. Could you explain what execution plan and execution strategy are about? I thought we removed execution strategy from v4. Yeah, I think execution strategy is removed. FIWS. Execution strategy in v3 was a way to instruct a scope how to execute its finalizers when the scope was closed. So the default was that you're in v3 and in v4. Wait, do we have an execution strategy? Scope strategy? No, I mean, now it's just a string, like we removed the module. But the idea here is that you can control how the finalizers are executed. The default is sequential finalizers, because in reality, like parallel finalizers is kind of dangerous if you don't know exactly what finalizers are in the scope, because executing finalizers in parallel can lead to race conditions. For example, if you have a connection that has to close before you close, I don't know, shut down the database. I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Like sometimes there's dependencies between finalizers, and that's why we execute them in reverse order. So that finalizers that were added before other ones are closed first. But there are cases where like finalizing in parallel makes sense. And so that's why we give you the option to execute all finalizers in parallel. And then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mattia, if you had a comment on that.
I'm just saying that the question was about v3 land, but you covered like what it did in v3. So unless there is like other questions about it, I think that we are fine.
It still exists in v4. It's just that it's now a string, and you can't. I don't think you can control concurrency in v3. The reason why it was a separate data structure was because there was a third variant that was like it was like parallel n was the third variant, and it actually had like a concurrency on it. Now I think we would just tell you to like use the concurrent, like the regional concurrency.
So
there was a question also.
Yeah.
I want to finish this one. Execution plan is a module that we introduced to allow you to create like a plan for how, like what services you want a program to run with. So like the concrete use case we had for this was the AI module, but it can be used with other ones. The idea is that a plan has many steps. And let's say you run your program and it fails after 2 attempts with a spaced schedule of 3 seconds. If it fails after this, then this step will be considered failed with the program, and it'll then provide this layer to your program and try running it with this like configuration. And then if that step fails, it'll then try to run with this configuration, right? So the idea is you can provide a set of services to your program with a configurable like retry behavior, and let it fall back. So again, the concrete use case we had was for AI programs. In many cases, you want maybe in the first layer, you configure the OpenAI client and your OpenAI model. And then if OpenAI is down, you would like fall back to this behavior. And you know the steps, it doesn't show it here, but the steps also accept a condition. So you can, where's the while input while? You can specify like while to continue running a step based on like input. So you can actually like control, should we keep retrying or should we like exit and move on to the next step?
So
does that clarify execution plan for you folks? If it doesn't, let me know. But the idea is to be able to have a sequence of steps that you can then run a program with. So then there's a with execution plan method that allows you to take a program and run it with said plan. Okay, Mattia, what did I miss?
So regarding the TaggedError class and Data.TaggedError we mentioned before, they say one issue I had with serialization was with Option.Option type. For something like Next.js, if I define a data interface that contains an option type, that property is not serializable, and the server client boundary due to the .json method, among other things. I know one solution is RPC, but that does some seems overkill when data fetching with sys. So I would have to manually transform option before crossing the boundary. I would say that here is a good example of leveraging schema in order to do the transformation of the boundaries. So defining like your error with schema tagged error, and then like converting that over your boundaries. So that way you can have the option combinator from schema that converts, for example, a structure with a tag into the actual option instance and vice versa. And that will take care for you for the serialization, deserialization on the edges. Basically, you will send over the wire for the RCs the plain serializable structure, and then you reconstruct that into the actual option concrete type.
Yeah, for server components, because option is a class and server components can't serialize classes very well, you just need to encode your data with schema, and encoding should be enough to allow it to cross that boundary.
So that was one reason about partial successes in Effect.all. Can an effect without an error get interrupted?
Hang on one second. How does one reason about partial success in an Effect.all? Can an effect without an error get interrupted? Do you mean like, okay, let's just, the answer is yes, if I'm understanding correctly. So here's what I'm understanding. This effect, always succeeds with the string, and it has never in the error channel, right? So it never fails. There's no error, quote unquote error, right? However, can we interrupt it? Hang on a sec. Yield effect.sleep 3 seconds. Sleepy program. I'm awake. Oops, that was not the right one. This one. Yield effect.fork. Sleepy program. I don't remember if this is going to keep. Now we sleep outside the fork for 1 second, and then we yield effect const fiber. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure if this is what the question was referring to, but let's also just reintroduce const program and do effect. So in this sleepy program, we sleep for 3 seconds, then we wake up, we return a string, and this is an effect that theoretically never fails. It has never in the error channel, right? If we look at the type that's returned here. However, if we fork this into a fiber, and then we sleep for 1 second outside after like we fork, we can then interrupt the fiber, no problem. Now, under the hood, this is modeled, like interruption is modeled as a failure, but it's in the I guess it's like it is technically like a separate. We have expected errors, unexpected errors, and interruptions theoretically as like failures, right? Tap cause effect.log error. Hopefully this is what the question was asking. Node, Scratchpad, office hours. And when we interrupt the fiber, I don't think we get anything back. The interruption here, like if a program gets interrupted by internal interruption, I think is the term. I forget. Like if it actually,
it yields the interrupt. Yeah.
What's going on here?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is a final state. Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know the LSP could detect that. That's cool. So let's do something different now. Let's not fork this into a fiber. So external interruption did not trigger the error. I think internal interruption does. I think. Please don't make me a liar. Oh God. So I have to do this here. I forget how we can actually like visualize what's going on here, but the idea here being that like this, the question was like, where was the question?
Can an effect without an error get interrupted?
Yeah. So if this is what you're referring to, like, can we interrupt this? Yes, we can interrupt this. But I'm not exactly sure if that's what you mean by like an effect without an error. And then the other piece of the question, partial success in an Effect.all. I'm not exactly sure. Again, if I'm, by the way, thank you all, the folks who followed me today on Twitch. Let me see. Shamanic Arts, Plague FPS, Olexmir, Wolf 2001, Matu Stefani, Consciousness Dev, Rohan Kuhl, and Sheba. Thank you all very much for the follow. I appreciate your support. Mattia, I don't know if I'm like reasoning about this correct.
Yeah, we got like a follow-up to that question saying, I'm trying to reason about how a finalizer could roll something back if it got interrupted.
So finalizers should not be interrupted.
Yeah.
Finalizers should not be interrupted. A finalizer should be a program that never fails, whether by like the only way a finalizer could fail is defect. Like if a defect crashes your program. And I can, if we look at maybe in effect add finalizer, and then we go to the actual implementation here. Where are we? Scope, add finalizer, exit. Somewhere in here. I think they want to run a finalizer on interruption. I'm a little confused on what's being asked.
Yeah.
If you want to run a finalizer on interruption, like if your program gets interrupted, the finalizers will run. Like if you have finalizers registered in your program, they will run on interruption, on errors, or on defects. Well, yes, on interruption they will run. Yeah. I don't know if that's the question.
Maybe if it's not clear, if it was not a question, maybe try to create a gist or a GitHub repo of what you are trying to accomplish and ask that on the office hours channel on our Discord. We will be more than happy to try to look into just give pseudocode of what you'd like to have, and we'll try to understand what's a better way to accomplish that in an effectful way.
I'm going Effect.all with 2 effects, 1 error, the other did something, and needs to rip a finalizer. Do you bind the finalizer first? Again, without code, I don't even know how to interpret this, because if you have a scoped effect, if you have an effect that needs to execute finalization logic, that's just my failing effect and my scoped effect, right? Darker, you tell me if I'm on the right track here. My failing effect. Boom. My scoped effect. So my failing effect is an effect that will always fail with a string, right? My scoped effect, this is an effect that has finalizers that it needs to run. This is the finalizer. Acquire release allows us to express this in one statement. We have an effect that requires some finalization logic. And you see that because when you look at the signature, you see there's a scope here. Now, if we run this, we provide the scope. Then we effect.run promise. This should be scoped.
Yeah.
Apologies. That's okay. And just again, tell me if I'm on the right track. So contains a single return statement. Tia, LSP. Satisfying Mattia's LSP. Okay. So if we have this Effect.all and we run this, we're going to see just the error. Okay. And the reason for this is if by default Effect.all runs sequentially, right? So my failing effect would run first. We would never hit this statement. We would never run this. We would never attach the finalizer. That's the first behavior I wanted to like show is Effect.all by default runs sequentially. So this right here is kind of no different than doing this.
One
right?
and then the other, yeah.
If we remove the comma. Theoretically, that's the same. Now, we can then make it concurrency of 2.
Yep.
Hello. And I think that this is going to sort of have undefined behavior because this is like.
I think that the first one being being like an immediate failure would always like fail first in theory, because still it's like immediately failing, like.
We can even make it slightly.
Yeah, you need to delay it a little, yeah.
We can make it less deterministic.
Yeah.
Right?
And
this should, in theory.
And
yeah. So we get this log. Now we're running these concurrently. So my failing effect hits the sleep, so it suspends, and it allows my scoped effect to start. Before, this was not even like allowing the second effect to start. It was failing like immediately. There was no async op happening here, so there was no way to start the second fiber. Now we have an async op. Suspension happens. It allows this one to start. So we start acquiring, and we immediately register the finalizer. Like when this effect is run, the finalizer is attached. When we fail after a second, the finalizer's already been attached to this scope, right? And because of that, even when we fail, we still get safe release of those resources. This is helpful. I might be getting confused by the gen syntax, so I only add the finalizer explicitly. Well, again, it's the same semantics, right? So like if we like adding the finalizer here, still allows cleanup to happen. Like the finalizer's attached here, then we run this program, right? This is the next thing that runs. We start this, it suspends, sleeps for a second, then we start the next one, it attaches this finalizer. But the idea here is these finalizers from these two different effects both get attached to this scope, and when we fail, this scope gets closed and those finalizers get run.
The thing is that they are, once you add them, they are guaranteed to be run, whatever the result of your application is. Going on to the effect, an interruption, a successful result, domain failure, whatever, they will be executed. That's it. So,
but this finalizer is running even if the scoped effect succeeds, right? From the initial question, maybe darker is better only wants to run the finalizer if the other one fails. Then you would need some sort of dependent logic. Like you would need to have like you can't conditionally run a finalizer necessarily. Like, I mean, you can, I guess. You would need like
some mutable state that keeps track of which is like,
right, like you would need to track failure somewhere and then have that in the closure here. But I think that's not. I'm not sure what the use case would be for that, but like if that's what you need to do, like that, you would need some mutable state that gets tracked and like resolved. The other thing you can do is if you need to run something on failure, like if you need to run cleanup logic and you don't want to attach a finalizer, you could also use Effect.Ensuring, which will always run. It's the same thing. You can register like a finalizer with an effect, but this will always run when this effect completes. Yeah, Carne is understanding. You only want to run the finalizer here. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, just so I understand. You only want to run the finalizer for this effect if this one fails. You do not want to run it on success. You do not want to run it on interrupt. Like you want, if this one, does effect have something akin to a transaction? Yeah, STM. We'll talk about STM next week. I think that this is one of those cases where Mattia's right, like a more featured example program that we can then like dig into. We've already like spent quite a bit of time on this, so I don't want to like spend any more time, but I think like a gist would be super helpful here.
At least of what you're trying to accomplish, because it could be one of those questions where you are maybe too focused on the way you want to implement that, and maybe Effect provides you a better primitive to get that out of the box. So probably having like few like what you are trying to do will help.
Yeah, you're not hogging the chat, Darker. That's not what I'm saying. It's more that like Mattia and I think are getting too in the weeds about like what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I forget, what is it called? The XY problem?
Yeah.
We have in our Discord like a thing that I think it's like under the community guidelines or something. Basically like because we're guilty of it too, we get too focused on like what you're trying to achieve. Whereas if you tell us about the problem instead, we can probably offer a different, more like semantic solution, as opposed to getting too in the weeds on like the problem.
The specific, yeah.
Any other questions? I want to show off Effect CLI.
Oh yeah, sure.
I was very excited about this. So I created this like the XY problem is when Mirella, hello. The XY problem is when you ask about your attempted solution rather than the actual problem. Be open to considering different approaches if your initial idea isn't working. Darker, don't feel bad about don't feel bad about asking this question. I think that it was a very good one. Anyway, moving on. Feel free, by the way, to ask in Discord, and you can ping me directly. I'll give you permission just this once, so that we can talk about it better.
Yep.
It's not just you guys. That is the first question I ask someone when they need me for semantic stuff. Yeah, I know. It's we really try not to get like sucked into the problem, but or into the attempted solution. We try to focus more on the problem, but it's hard. Anyway, I want to talk about CLI because I'm excited about it. I
am hyped as well for it. I've been trying some of the new features and I really love them.
So wait, quick question. Solo PM non-programmer using LLMs for coding. Want to leverage DDD tools to make legal states possible? Where do I go for idiom guardrails? Start at the effect documentation, and also take a look at Kit Langdon's Effect.Institute. And then for setting up projects with Effect, I would also look at Effect.Solutions, also from Kit. Yeah, that's where I would start. So anyways, Effect v4 CLI. We tried to take a lot of feedback from folks on v3 level. Sorry. We tried to take feedback from folks in v3 and incorporate that into v4. And we've also added some features along the way. But what I think is pretty cool, first off, I mean, there are, there's lots of folks who miss it, to be honest with you, but like, I've heard a lot of feedback about people who miss the effect v3 double spacing. But the help documentation when you run a command in v4 should be much terser and give you like a little bit prettier output, so you can actually see what's going on. And I recently added, I'll be merging the PR after this, I think, but support for something which I'm calling like global flags. I think this comes from Cobra, the Go CLI framework. But the idea is that you can register flags that are global to every command. And you can define like the behavior that you want to be associated with them. So there's two kinds of global flag. This is like a brand new feature, so I just kind of wanted to talk about it. There's an action which allows you to define a flag that short circuits the CLI. That's why it's like an action like performs a side effect in your CLI and immediately exits. So you get like access to the value of your flag and some context, which I think is just more about like the path and everything that was executed. But for example, built into the CLI, the help command and I think version also are actions. So when you run them, none of the handlers actually get executed. It's just a side effect that happens, right? I think that help is one of them. I might be wrong. Hang on. See, global flag, help. Yeah, here we go. So they're defined as like, am I on the right branch? No. Sorry. I knew like I made changes and it just didn't look right. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so like when you define an action, it's basically short-circuiting behavior. So you specify the flag, like what you want to show up in the help output, and then you provide the logic that should be executed here in line. I'm echoing, or am I echoing through Mattia's stream maybe?
I don't know if it's mine. I can mute myself for a second.
Let's see, yeah. Let us know if the echoing is better while Mattia's muted. It was Mattia? Okay. Sorry, Mattia. Just unmute and chime back in if you need.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. So anyways, this is a brand new feature, and I could use some early feedback on it, but the idea is you can have action flags, which are short circuit behavior, like you run it and it short circuits the CLI, and that's cool. But there's also what I'm calling like global flag settings, which take a flag and a default value. So in the case of log level, you can like either set it or not. And settings don't do anything by default. They just track. They allow you to pass the flag and they track like the value that's currently associated with the flag. But what's cool about this is like, let's go back to my sample CLI, wherever that is. And maybe we can have like a, I don't know, color global flag dot setting flag. And let's say flag dot string the color. And we'll say default value blue. So by default, this doesn't do anything, right? This thing will be registered as a global flag, but no behavior is actually associated with these setting flags. They're just meant to hold a particular value, and then you can override the value by specifying the flag. But what's cool about this is you can then use the flag, like these global value flags, in your handlers. So let's say I wanted to get access to the color color. So you can yield these directly, and they give you back the value of the parsed flag or the default value that you pass in if the flag was not passed. And you could say like my favorite color is color. And then these get registered with your CLI. So here. Does provide still accept an array? I think it does. So you can do like global flag dot add. I don't think we need to do this as a layer. So I can, again, use a little bit of feedback on the API, but the idea is you could just like add these global flags to your program, or you could add it to like individual handlers or whatever. But with a global flag, the idea is to add it like globally. And now when I rerun this, oops, the color thing will show up here. And if we actually run like greet name, let's look at the help docs for greet. Greeting name. Okay. Greeting. Woo. Mattia.
Hello,
Missing
Robert.
required flag color. Oh yeah. I think that this parsing behavior is a bug. But let's just say red. So the idea, like once I fix this, the idea would be that these global flags, oh, I know why. It's because I didn't make it optional. And perhaps like the better way of doing this is to make the with default thing here, like the actual fallback behavior, and maybe I get rid of the default value altogether. But now this would be like an option, right? So I don't really want to handle the option, but the idea is that like you can have things that are global to your program, like log level and things like that, and you can use those to inject behavior. So in the CLI itself, we use like the log level setting in the via the command.provide APIs. Command.provide allows you to like create layers from past arguments, but you can also use the built-in settings. Like you can yield the value of the setting and then adjust the behavior of your command based on that. So the API is still early. I could use some feedback on this, but I think it's kind of cool. And it basically is a way to, it's a refactoring of like built-in commands. So that like you have a little bit more control and you can get access to these built-ins a little bit easier than you would have before. What else? What else can we talk about? Completions is cool. We can talk about that.
I also loved the grouping in the help. That was really nice.
Yes. I think you can now do that. So what is it? Command dot, I think it's like, I forget the, maybe my branch is not up to date. My branch might not be like fully up to date, but there's like work being done on the CLI to make it better. But you can generate like completions. So this will spit out like a completion script that you can then like source. So like, let's do an example for ZSH because that's what I use. Zish, and let's put this to greet.zsh, and then I'll source greet. And now if I do greet, I forget how this works. Was it test? Yeah. So like the completion scripts now are auto-generate. Like they're auto-generated like they were before, but they work a little bit better across the different shells. So you can do like, you can get access to the different like subcommands. So if we go into greet, for example, and we look at it, it'll tell us like, oh, we have a positional argument, so the name of the person to greet. And then we have like different options we could specify here if we wanted to. So this works really well in Zish and Fish shells. In Bash, you don't get quite as much power out of like the complete APIs, but yeah, I think this is a pretty cool feature.
And it's free, so who doesn't like free stuff, as someone says?
Who doesn't like free stuff? And I think that Tim added a few other features recently as well. Let me see. Let me open up packages. I like backport to V3, please. V3 is on a feature freeze. We will not be backporting any of these features to V3. Sorry. Random question. Why is there an effect.asSum but no effect.asNone? It might be an oversight. I would say feel free to open an issue. Does the completions support string literals? Do you mean like choices? If you mean choices, then yes. So let's do that again. Source test CLI.
I think you also need to share again your screen.
Shoot. Right. Screen, window. I was just trolling with the backport. I know you were. I know this now, FIWS. I know to take everything that you say with a grain of salt. What is migrate under? DB, oh, DB. DB, migrate. So you can see that string literals here are supported down and up. And then if we select like, I don't know, down, we can also get information about the positionals. So trying out V4 without a good Drizzle implementation alternative is painful. I'm very sorry. The Drizzle team will catch up eventually when we're out of beta. Please don't ban me. Listen, you're on thin ice, FIWS. You're on thin ice. Foos. Foos. I don't even say your username. Thank you, Gerson. I thought it was cool as well. I thought this stuff was cool as well.
It is a really, really nice feature to have. It is one of those things that make your experience with the CLI great, but it's a pain to write manually. And Effect CLI gives you that for free.
Also, for those of you who did not know this, when you have a subcommand, for example, like migrate, right, like we have here, let's change this first of all to be an effect.fn untraced. So when you have a subcommand like migrate and you want to get access to options and arguments that were passed to the parent, you can just yield the parent in the child. Of course, this isn't going to work because I need to separate. You have to like have the handler attached a little bit differently, but in general, the idea is you can get access to these arguments. It does require you to like attach the handler separate from the command. Otherwise, you'll get like circularity, which is what this error is talking about. But yeah, this is a feature in the CLI as well that most people, I guess, don't know about. But if you need access to the parent's options and args, you can yield the child as long as you attach the handler separate from the command. Anywho,
let's see.
anything we missed in Discord? Hi, I'm Gerson from YouTube, expanding the question about HTTP API endpoint handler being defined standalone. My use case is for times where routing is defined elsewhere and I don't need the effect router, for example, in Azure Functions or a Next.js API route. Here's an example of what I would love to have. If that's the case, why not avoid using HTTP API? Actually, wait. There's a because like HTTP API assumes it's going to be doing routing for you, right? Let me copy paste this, and so people can see what we're talking about. So, where's the group? Here, I was like fairly certain there was like group user dot endpoints dot, I don't know. I swear there was a way to do this. Add annotate. Maybe not. I could have just like made this up in my head, but Mattia, you were like pretty confident there's like.
I thought I remembered seeing a commit about that, but probably I misunderstood that. I thought that I'd see something like converting directly the handler to something.
Yeah, Gerson, there may not be a good way to do this. HTTP API builder endpoint to web handler. I would say feel free to open an issue and we can discuss it there because this feature may not exist. I think it's worth chatting about. But I will say that in the vast majority of circumstances, if you've got if routing is being handled elsewhere, I don't think I would use HTTP API then. Like the point of using this is that your routing and everything like that is kind of all packaged up into one nice thing. Having said that, I think that we should still maybe see if we can do something like this. So yeah, feel free to open an issue and we can discuss it there. Max, effect cluster port when? What do you mean? Cluster exists in v4.
I think that you mentioned before seeing your effect cluster port of your stream tools, if I recall correctly.
Oh, yes. I don't know when. I don't know. There have been like so many things that have come up that needed to be addressed. Yeah, my bot. Yeah. There have been a lot of things that have come up. So I'm not sure when we'll work on that port again. Yeah. Will Effect Experimental Machine be a part of v4 at some point? Is it not in here? No. I am not sure. Feel free to open an issue and like ask us to add it back. We can consider it as a feature request. Can't guarantee it will actually make it in. Because basically like everything under experimental was really just us trying stuff out, mostly Tim. So not 100% sure that it will make it into the core, but you can feel free to open an issue and ask. All right, folks. I think that it's been about an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We'll probably, unless Mattia, you want to, somebody had asked a little while ago, I remember, and I forgot to tell you. if there was anything interesting with the LSP with v4, does it fully support v4? Maybe you can address that, and then we can.
Yeah, I would just say that right now it fully addresses Effect v4. If you find some bugs, like we mentioned before, that we have seen a label that's different from the code that gets actually injected, again, feel free to open any issue, like for things that don't behave as you would expect with v4. Also, there are some couple of new refactors that could be interesting for people still on Effect v3, but like preparing for future possibilities with v4. There is now, for example, a migration that converts an effect.service back into a context tag with a layer and provided layers, so that you can start choosing not to use right now effect.service, so that you are more like on a single way for when you will migrate to Effect v4. But other than that, up to now, it has been mostly like feature parity with v4. Again, if you find anything that doesn't behave as you would expect, something that you would like to see in, for example, I saw before like a question about like LLMs getting into more JavaScripty pattern that effect patterns. Again, feel free to open any discussion into the Discord channel. Always happy to look into adding new diagnostics, new stuff into the LSP in order to help you and your AI bot friends produce better output.
Cool. So yeah, if there is stuff that you want us to address more formally, like Mattia said, open an issue in the small repo. We'll try to take a look. We've been trying to be relatively quick with those things. But yeah, thank you all very much for attending today. Hope you all enjoyed it very much. And we will see you next week, where hopefully we'll have Mike on with us to talk about STM. And he can teach both Mattia and I about STM again.
Yes.
Cheers, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.